Hello, welcome to this episode of Effing the Ineffable. I'm Lonnie Milbus. Today's episode is the result of questions that I've overlooked as just questions that occur in everyday life. Usually varying conversations, things like that about meditation. And I noticed a recurring pattern of people who have questions toward spiritually minded people about meditation, who have a sense of being bad at it somehow. So I've observed these conversations, and it seems that there's a widespread belief that you can be bad at meditating, and there are always those who feel, who appear to feel anyhow, good at meditating, who are quick to jump in to help these people out, provide them with volumes of vocabulary terms from their own favorite systems that they have chosen. Buddhist meditation terms, Hindu Vedic meditation terms, all kinds of different jargons and intellectual avenues through which we can achieve meditative states of consciousness. But the truth, or what I believe is the truth, is that we all meditate. That it's natural. That it's a part of us, a part of who we are. Like thinking, we don't think about thinking. We just do it. And kind of the same with meditation. At least, from my view, I would say an example of this is who hasn't contemplated a particular problem that comes up in life until all the reason and all the logic we can muster, all of the facts that we can put together, all the Ben Franklin lists are made, and we've exhausted all of these tools for problem solving and basically given up. And just sit there, whether we're frustrated or apathetic or ready to move on or whatever, and we just become silent. We've exhausted ourselves. We become silent. The problem starts to fade from consciousness. And out of the silence of that surrender, the perfect answer appears. And we want to say we came up with it. Like we came up with the answer, but we didn't. All of our tools failed us. And I mean, not that we didn't, because we're going to have to define what self is and what self is not later. But of our mind, of our tools of the mind, of the intellect, we did not solve the problem. The problem simply the solution simply presented itself to us. And that's contemplative meditation. That's a form of meditation. Exhausting all of the knowledge, exhausting all of the intellectual tools until there's a silence out of which appears the solution or the answer or the inspiration or whatever it is we're looking for. So also another example, who hasn't been so stressed out that you exhaust your emotions to the point that you just sit and breathe. I can't take it anymore. I can't think about it. I can't look at it. I can't do this. I need to just sit here and breathe and get back to basics. And out of that silence comes a peace that you can't fully explain. And I hear a lot of people say, this problem was so bad. I'm just numb to it now. I've become numb, and it's, they say that, and I say that. I'm saying they, but just using terms, because this is from my experience that I'm drawing this, that, I felt as though when I've said that this is an apathy, this is a bad thing. Well, now I just don't care. when the truth is this is a transcendental state. You don't really feel bad, you feel nothing. And that's uncomfortable because then you feel like you don't care. But the truth of it is in the cosmic scope of everything, in the entire universe, our problems don't matter, regardless of how special, either we or others feel about us. We're not a big deal. So to not put a whole bunch of emotional energy into these kind of ego constructs that are typically, the nature of our problems is a transcendental state. So that peace is a result of meditation. So just because you're not sitting as, the great master, whoever, great master Bob or whoever is sitting, in that posture and using these terms that, that are used to describe all of the million derivations of meditation, doesn't mean that you're not good at meditating. It just means that somebody is overly intellectual and convinced you that somehow in meditation you're going to gain all of these words, or all of this posture or all of this whatever it is. But I believe the truth is we're meditating, all of us, from our early stages on. And it's just a part of our lives, and it just goes undetected. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't work on it. And also, the fact that our problems don't matter. I want to go back to that contemplative meditation a little bit, or not the contemplative, but the transcendental state. The fact that our problems don't matter and that, we're really small in the scope of everything, that doesn't mean that we should stop living our lives and just meditate until our lives fall away, until we die of starvation or dehydration, or whatnot. We still live our lives. But it can lead us to get more out of our meditative practices, to know these things, to have these realizations, and then these meditative practices improve the way that we live our lives. So anyway, as far as to what is the nature of meditation, where do these things come from? From where do the answers spring? From where does the peace come? I want to do an exercise, and it will work much better if you're reading or listening to participate in this exercise. So if you don't mind, please follow my direction. Now I'm going to ask you here's the first direction. I ask you to point your finger at the first object you see, or the first object that comes to mind. Basically, just point your finger at an object. Remember what that object is that you chose. Name it in your mind. Whatever it is, whatever you would call it in your language, name it. What did you point at? Now, point that same finger at yourself. Now, hold very still now. Hold the finger there, pointing at yourself. Now, while still pointing at yourself, as you did with the object you first pointed toward, look at the part of your body that you were pointing at. Most of you, I'm willing to bet, are probably pointing at your chest, your heart, in that general area. Maybe some of you are pointing at your head. Where exactly are you pointing? Break it down. Not I'm pointing at myself, but where did you pick that self? What location did you decide that self is? Now, why do you think you chose this particular part of your body when I asked you to point at yourself? I didn't say point at your body. I said point at yourself. If you did not point at your foot, why not? Is your foot a part of not self? Is that something apart from yourself? Why not your other hand? Perhaps more importantly, why didn't you point at your eyes or other sensory organs with which you experience the world? I mean, these are the things that were the input from your world is entering into your mind And very few will point at the brain. I'm sure some of you pointed at your brain or your head in some way, but that's the center of your sense mechanisms. So it would make sense in this sensory way to point at your head, but that's the source of all your physical action and experience. Is the brain not self? For those of you that didn't point at it, and for those of you who did, is the brain really the location of self? Why not foot? Why not hand? Why did you choose what you did to represent the physical location of yourself? Or I is the word I would rather use. Self is more, it alludes more of an object, whereas I carries a different weight to it. So let's think about this and then ask why didn't I point back at the same object I pointed at first? What was it? Was it a hat, a door, a child, the thing that when I first gave that direction, what did you point at first? And then why was that not pointed at again when I said point at yourself? Are these any less a part of that I with which you identify than is the skin and the bone in your chest, which you were quick to point out is I? All of the cells in that skin will be replaced many times in your lifetime. Is that chest still you when it's replaced with a whole different structure of cells? Is it not you? Is it something outside of you? Is it a not you? There is something there in the chest. Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita that he is seated there, that God is seated in the heart. And the Lema Hadith is there. Christianity has the Sacred Heart. What resides there in most of us is a doorway through which our individual mind can open up to the expanded self and let others in. This is where universal love comes in. We're recognizing everything sentient and, hopefully insentient, and consequence, natural progression from that is self. And so we're letting things in, would be the metaphor, when actually we're just expanding into it to realize that all is self. So we open up to this expanded self through that place in our chest to realize that self is omnipresent. So the commandments of Jesus to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul, and to love thy neighbor as thyself, are the only commandments in the New Testament, the only commandments that come from Jesus in that book. And they allude to this. They're important. They're all that we need for spiritual unfoldment. We don't need any of these other rules, any of these other words or names or anything else. And why? Because the Lord thy God and our neighbor are also a part of ourself. And this is why all religions value love above all else. If we do not follow the advice, it's commonly said, to open our heart. It's a common phrase, open your heart. If we don't follow that, we are, as the Bible says, as a branch of a tree that has been cut off and withereth. We tend to shrivel up within ourselves, or within what we think is ourself, within the individual manifestation, the ego. But even those shells are self, just in a devolved state. And we want to be more aware of our state of union, not less. And we can work to be less aware. We can work to be more egocentric, but we're procrastinating in doing so, the work that must be done eventually. So there is no location that houses any more or less of self than any other, because to attribute self to any particular location implies a not self, and that simply does not exist. Your real nature is consciousness, and consciousness exists undivided everywhere of which we can be made conscious. Consciousness is requisite to existence. Therefore, not consciousness or an opposite or something other than consciousness cannot exist. So every time we meditate, this is what meditation is. We're trying to return to this, not to stay, permanently while we're in this form, but to improve the way we think about and live our lives after our meditation. And the more we do this, the more in harmony with everything we become. So, if you feel you're bad at meditation, first stop it. There's no reason to have thoughts like that. There can't be any truth. There can't be any good coming from thoughts of we're bad at these things. So I would recommend just sitting quietly as possible. The mind is going to ramble. Ideas are going to pop up. Things are going to pop up. And we gently move those aside if they're not, a part of something coming to us through this meditation. And just sit there until something happens. And that something is defined by you. If it's a feeling, an inspiration, an idea, an answer to a problem, a peace, a love, a samadhi, a state of God realization, whatever it is, don't pick it out before it happens. Don't go into a meditation expecting something because then you're just imposing mind upon this thing. But just sit quietly until something happens that when you experience it, you can say, hey, yeah, that's good enough for today. Let's work with that. And really that's it. I mean, there are, millions, I'm not going to say millions. I don't know how many techniques there are, but there are a lot of techniques. I get wrapped up in numbers at times. But there are endless techniques and methods and everything else that are good for expanding, working on our meditation skills. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing those things. I myself have done a great many of different techniques and things like that, and have found them all helpful in some fashion or another, if for nothing else, that you're sitting down working on meditation, which is a meditation. You're building good habits of meditating and of giving meditation some importance in your daily work. So don't be hard on yourself. Don't, say you're bad at meditation. Just do it. And do it until something happens that you feel is something. That's it. And do it often. If you can do it several times a day, do. If you can do 30 seconds 10 times a day, that's great. The more often you do it, the more you're building that habit, the easier it's going to be to reside a lot of your time in a meditative state, as we are the habits that we produce, the habits that we feed to become what we are. So meditation is about quiet, in a sense. But then again, we've got contemplative meditation, where you're asking questions and reasoning things out. But at the end, there's generally a silence, and something comes from out of that silence, kind of an answer to whatever we're seeking. And that's basically the gist of it. That's the skeleton of meditation. And if you keep that in mind, no matter what techniques you're trying, whether it's Buddhist specific or Taiji, which is moving meditation, or whatnot, you're likely to find at least something that you can assess as a success in meditation for yourself. And of course, the more of these that you accumulate, the more confident you'll be, and the more you'll do it. And that's a good thing. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it was not too simplistic, not too basic for you. But I think it needed to be said. I think for the people that I'm encountering in my life and the ones that seem to be entering my sphere of experience, it was important. And as with all of these episodes, it's important for me. These are as much for me as they are for anyone else, so that later I can look back and listen and remind myself of the lessons I've learned on the path. So as usual, I thank you very much for listening. And I wish you well in your work, in your practice, and in your lives. And I'll look forward to hopefully producing another one of these very soon. Thank you.